Hello, I'm Ernestine Standberry. You don't see me much on my shows. I'm director and founder of the International Pro-Life Federation. And I would just like to say that we have two very active chapters. Richard Simpalo of the African Life Youth Foundation, he is international director and very active and very positive in this pro-life organization. Also, Festo Muaso in Nairobi, Kenya. That's another active chapter. And as of last week, I want to introduce Abele. We call him Abele Kapale. Well, really and truly, Mr. Kabele is in Johannesburg, South Africa, where we have another new chapter started by the work and effort of Richard Simpalo of the African Life Youth Foundation. And also, I'd like to say that William Doc Walls, he's now the first vice president of this organization. He will be coming on with different topics and shows and political issues to keep all of us abreast here. Today I have a very distinguished man on my show, and I've been postponing bringing Mr. Bernard Turner on, and I just said, no, I have to bring him on. He is an author, he's a publisher, and a very, insofar as books, I'm going to introduce you to him, and I just would like for you to just talk about yourself and tell me all what you do and how it got started. So, Mr. Turner, Bernard Turner.
Good afternoon,
Hi.
Ernestine Standberry.
Hi.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yes.
I look forward to telling you a little bit more about what I do and how I got started.
Okay.
About 12 years ago, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do when I retired from my career in the book publishing business. And I decided that I really wanted to do something that was going to enrich me as a person and something that I would really enjoy doing for many, many years. So I decided to volunteer at the Chicago History Museum. And since 2000, I've been a volunteer interpreter at the Chicago History Museum. And I give walking tours in neighborhoods.
Is that the Chicago Historical Society?
Yes, it used to be called the Chicago Historical Society.
I remember that's when I used to go when it was called the Chicago Historical Society.
Right, and now it's called the Chicago History Museum.
Oh, okay.
So since 2000, I've been giving walking tours and bus tours and tours in the museum. I give tours of, L tours even, of the Brown Line, L,
Oh, yeah.
the Green Line West, and the Green Line South.
Really?
And I give also neighborhood tours as well. And that kind of got me interested in Chicago history.
Okay.
And one of the other things I decided was that I wanted to be as a somewhat of an expert on Chicago history. So I decided to do some research on the neighborhood that I grew up in. And you're probably familiar with this neighborhood. It's on the south side. It's called Bronzeville.
Oh, yes.
And my father in the 1950s actually owned a Standard Oil station in Bronzeville.
Really?
And we lived in that neighborhood. And he was one of...
In the 50s, that was unusual.
It was very unusual.
Owner of a Standard Oil service station?
Yeah, he was one of only 5 African American men who had Standard Oil gas stations at that time.
Oh, wow.
And so one of the things I decided to do was to do some research on the Bronzeville neighborhood. And I actually wrote a book about it. And my first book that I wrote is called A View of Bronzeville. And it's all about the Bronzeville neighborhood. And it has been out since 2002, I believe, and has sold many, many copies. And I still have more.
Wonderful.
And it also gives me the opportunity to give tours to groups of people, to church groups, to, family reunions and clubs and things like that. So I really enjoy that. The second book that I wrote was a story about something that also focuses in the neighborhood. and it was a children's story called TJ and the Mysterious Stranger. I didn't bring it today, but it's all about a little boy whose father passed away, and he has to figure out how he's going to help his family. And what he decides to do is to get a paper route. And it's somewhat autobiographical because when I was a kid, I had a paper route, so I knew the ins and outs of all of that. But what I really wanted to tell the people who read that book is when I was a kid, my family used to take me to the Bud Billiken Day Parade every year. And for the life of me, I never knew what the Bud Billiken name, where it came from. And still there's a lot of people who don't know.
Yeah, and that's something.
They don't know, where the
It's for
character came
children.
from. But actually, the name Billiken was a Chinese doll. And Robert Abbott, the founder of the Defender, used the name Billiken and named the character Bud Billiken, who was supposed to be sort of a defender of children or someone who helped out children. So that's where the name came from. So people
I know
can,
about that part of it, but I didn't know about that Billiken part came
right.
from a Chinese
It
doll.
was actually from a Chinese doll.
Wonderful.
The third book that I wrote is a book about Chicago history for children, and it's called Our Chicago People and Places, and it's a book that focuses on the four historical, actually you could call it the stars that are on the Chicago flag, the four big events in Chicago history, the Fort Dearborn Massacre, the Chicago Fire of 1871, the World's Fair of 1893, and the Century of Progress World's Fair in 1933. So it goes through, all of the founding of the city, why people live here, a little bit about the geography. It tells you about the government, and it's a book that can help the children understand their city.
And that's wonderful.
It's Our
Because a
Chicago.
lot of times you don't get that in education.
Exactly.
I mean, you get geography, but usually you don't get much about your own city and town.
And the next book that I wrote was a book called The Windy City, Chicago's Historical Hidden Treasures. And this is a book for people who really like to explore the city, who like to go to places that are kind of off the beaten path and discover new things. And we have destinations in there such as Graceland Cemetery. We have the Dawes Mansion. Charles Dawes was the vice presidential candidate. We have the Bud Billiken Day Parade in there. We have the DuSable Museum. We have the Chicago Methodist Church that's downtown that's in a skyscraper. We have the Haymarket affair, things like that in there, so you can learn about the history of Chicago. And another book that I wrote is called Chicago Neighborhoods with Flavor, Getting Out of the Loop. And if you've ever seen the TV show Check Please?
Yes.
Have you ever seen Check
Yeah, I've
Please?
seen that. I used to watch that all the time.
Yeah, well they have, they tell you all about the restaurants,
Yes.
but they don't really tell you about the neighborhoods.
That's right.
So what I did was I actually invited some of my friends and people that I knew to tell me about where they would take a guest. If they had someone from out of town visiting them, where would they take them to eat in their neighborhood? So all of my guests and friends actually picked out the restaurants, and we went to eat in the restaurant. So I got to eat in a restaurant in 17 different neighborhoods in Chicago, and that's what's featured in the book. So
The neighborhoods. What did you? What, south, or were you all over the city, or?
Well, we did about 4 or 5 South Side neighborhoods, such as Bronzeville, Bridgeport. What's that neighborhood? Beverly, Morgan
yeah.
Park. We
You
also
go to
did
Roseland
Chatham.
area
No, we
and
did
Burnside?
Chatham.
Chatham. Mm.
And on the north side, we did Lincoln Park, we did North Center, Lincoln Square, Portage Park, uh, Logan Square, all of those neighborhoods. And we have restaurants in there from all of those different neighborhoods.
Now, did you find that the people are different in certain areas of the city?
I just find people in Chicago are friendly and wonderful everywhere you go.
Yes.
But I mean, you can see some differences in, ethnic differences, and there are certain places where you can go in the city where all of the signs are in Polish, or all of the signs are in Korean, or all of the signs are in Spanish. So you really get to appreciate the diversity and the rich cultures that we have in the city of Chicago. So that's kind of my passion, learning about Chicago and learning about the neighborhoods and giving out those kinds of information. Another book that I wrote about a year ago is my Spanish coloring book. And it's a book for children to help them to learn a little bit of Spanish and have a little fun coloring. And most recently, I wrote a book about the Woodlawn neighborhood. I haven't published it yet, but it's a book that is also for children to help them understand the Woodlawn neighborhood and the dynamic of the University of Chicago and how what kind of impact the university has on a neighborhood like that.
Really?
There's so much rich history there in Woodlawn as well. A lot of people don't know that the World's Fair, the World's Columbian Exposition of 1893, was right there in Jackson Park. And 28 million people visited the World's Columbian Exposition in 1893. It's a ton of people who visited it. A lot of people know, for example, that there is an area between the University of Chicago, like 59th, between 60th and 59th Street, called the Midway.
Yes.
And the Midway was really a big part of the World's Fair. And that's where they had the Ferris wheel.
Yes.
And that was an original design by George Ferris. And it was supposed to really compete with what was at the World's Fair in Paris a few years earlier. Because obviously
well,
they
that's
had...
a kind of a distinction.
Right.
It really does.
Well, the World's Fair in Paris, they had the Eiffel Tower. So Chicago being Chicago, they wanted to produce something even better than the Eiffel Tower, so they chose the...
I know that's where they usually have the Caribbean, African Caribbean get-together every summer. My niece is Jamaican, and she always comes here from Indianapolis to see that. But I noticed that this book was with Rosa, Nikki Giovanni. This book, it strikes me, this particular book. Now, that's a magazine, or is that like one of your publications, or what is?
This book actually is one of the teacher read-alouds from a program called Voices, Literature, and Writing. And it is one of many publications that focus in on conflict resolution. And when you think of literacy, you teach kids how to read. One thing is always missing, and that is the social and emotional learning aspect that children really need to become good citizens and to cut down on some of the bullying and violence that takes place. But this one is one of the books that's part of that program that helps to develop a positive school climate in schools. And my company that I work for is focusing on that in the Chicago Public Schools. One of the other books that is in the one of the teacher read-alouds is this one, called Nobody Knew What to Do. And this is a story about bullying.
Oh,
And when you think
I
about it,
really need to read that one.
yeah, I mean, if
The
you think
teachers.
about it, if children are able to read books that help to give them a choice as to whether or not they fight back or whether or not they do something different that's going to help them resolve a conflict, it's going to help them in the long run.
Right.
And this is another one. This one is called My Secret Bully. And this one is a little bit different because it features girls. And you don't often think that girls have problems with bullying, but they do.
They do.
So
really.
the children are able to read these books and it helps them to resolve some of the conflicts that they have.
And they really need those because this latest case about the little boy, what is that? Just this week, 14 little boy, he committed suicide because he was bullied so much. I heard about that this morning on the news, and he killed himself.
Wow.
All that bullying really affects the children today. I know when I came up, it was a little girl in my neighborhood. She was a bully. She's really rough. But by me being like a little central leader, what I did, I got everybody to not speak to her. And so nobody would ever speak to her. And so she knew I was behind it. So I know she could beat me up. So I just had a strategy of how to get everybody to not speak to her and maybe. Well, anyway, what happened is that she felt pretty sad about not having friends and nobody would speak to her. I got the whole neighborhood not to speak to her. And that was my solution of handling a bully because she ended up coming to me and crying and she wanted to be my friend and we got to be friends. But some children, you can tell them to use certain strategies. Mine wasn't fighting back because I know she could beat me.
Right.
So mine was like, get everybody to not speak to her, get everybody to not say nothing to her. And then, she came around.
Well, that's good.
Because most bullies are people really who have a whole lot of problems, and
Absolutely.
a lot of them have loneliness issues and, all kinds of insecurities, and they just show them in that aggressive way.
Right. Well, you can just imagine how if young children beginning in preschool are hearing stories.
Really?
Hearing stories.
My little grandson.
That help them to make choices that are positive choices, starting in preschool and going all the way up through 8th grade, we're going to have a more peaceful and more productive group of kids
in our school. And I
in
understand the reasoning why it's happening so prevalent today. I mean, we had that happening in our days, but it's not like today, And even my little grandson told me, "Oh, Grandma, there's a little bully in my school." I said, "Well, does he make you feel bad?" He said, "Well, not really. Sometimes he kind of pick on me, but sometimes he don't. I ignore him." He said, "But you know what, Grandma? Sometimes I have to wear my Spider-Man suit to school, and I just feel better." I said, "Oh, you feel really okay when you put your Spider-Man suit in?" So sometimes he does. He told his mom, he said, "I want to wear my Spider. When I don't feel good on them days, he don't feel good. He put on the Spider-Man outfit and he gets through the day."
Oh, okay. Well, that's great. That's great.
Yes, but you'd be surprised at the little methods and the little bitty babies, bully, they getting that kind of a negative thing. And I just,
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, that's great.
in your future, you're going to continue to write, I know.
Oh, I'm going to continue to write. I have some ideas of things that I would like to focus on. But right now I'm working on a book with a colleague of mine from the Chicago Black Authors Network, and her name is Michelle Duster. And she's a great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells. And she and I are working on a book that's going to focus on African-American leaders throughout American history.
Wonderful.
And we've started doing some research and some writing on that.
And they're going to be mostly the ones come from Chicago or just in general?
In general. There will be, people that you've heard of before.
Yes.
Ida B. Wells will be there, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, Harold Washington, all
It'll
throughout
be like
history.
a compilation.
A compilation.
And we need that, a compilation of all the great leaders.
Right.
Because you can get individual books, but I haven't
Absolutely.
seen too many compilations.
And the aspect of this book that we're really going to focus on most is not just their life and their accomplishments, because most people are aware of their life and their accomplishments, but how did they work together? How did they inspire each other? How did they
Really?
collaborate with each other?
Yes.
You think of maybe how did Frederick Douglass work with Ida B. Wells, for example?
Right.
How did they influence each other? How did they actually contribute to each other's success? So that's kind of the aspect that we're going to work on in that book. As I mentioned, I'm working with a group of people, the Chicago Black Authors Network, and we have about 12 members at this point. Then we write books about a variety of different genres, including children's books, novels, romance books, and we hope to promote the work that we do throughout the city and around the country.
Wonderful.
As we move forward.
Now, as a publisher, can anybody bring a transcript to you and you publish it, or do you go over it? You don't just do. For instance, like everybody that want to write a book, you might not want to publish it. Do you say no or yes to what? What is
Well, I mean, I'm a very, very small publisher. I've only published 7 books.
that? Okay.
Most of them are books that I wrote. Over the past couple of years, there have been a few people who have sent manuscripts to me. I mainly publish books about Chicago history and culture. So if someone sends me a book about cooking, I probably wouldn't want to publish
Yeah,
it.
I can see that.
I would probably, if there's a book about Chicago, I would probably look at the manuscript and determine whether it would be something that would be marketable, and I would collaborate with that person and find out, what kind of plans they have and how they would want to promote it in the audience and so forth, and make a decision based on that. But yeah, people have actually sent me manuscripts that I've considered publishing, and perhaps I will do so in the future.
Wonderful. I was looking at the View of Bronzeville. Books like that, which I think a lot of us living here need. Is that book? Can I get that book on the bookstore? You can get it in any bookstore. Can you? Do you have to come through you? Or I would like for people. First of all, they could show your. They can contact you at Bernard Turner at Chicago.
It's B. Turner at highlightsofchicago.com.
B. Turner at highlightschicago.com. And you can order these books?
You can order them, but they're also in certain museums, such as the DuSable Museum, the Chicago History Museum, the Cultural Center.
So I can always pick up a copy?
Yeah, you can pick up a copy.
Any of those places?
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you've been around doing this how long?
Well, the volunteering and the tours and so forth for about 10 years. So I've been working with several groups in the city, such as the Bronzeville Visitor Information Center, and also with another organization that I'm involved with right now is the Camp Douglas Restoration Foundation. And a lot of people are not aware that during the Civil War from 1861 to 1865, we actually had a Confederate prisoner of war camp on the south side of Chicago, around 31st and King, what is now 31st and King Drive. And
but you know why that's not hard to believe? Because today, do you know that the American government, they're putting up these, what do they call them, detention camps throughout the United States for, they call it American terrorist groups. And you can be labeled an American terrorist now, because of the Patriot Act, anybody, if you say something against this government and they don't really like you, but they have, I saw that on the news last week. We have detention camps that's built, waiting for civil disobedience, and so far as the people who we say we're going to be protesting. Well, we don't know how long that freedom of speech right is going to be out there for this continuous protest, the way they're going. And I see, insofar as even CAN TV, and I'd like to tell our audience to contribute to CAN TV and become a member and join this organization to keep free speech alive and to have the kind of shows that we have now, shows that, mainstream television, you may not get that, You're right here in Chicago, okay? So we may not get that on the mainstream, but CAN TV is very viable. People watch it, and we just want people to try to just do everything you can to keep free speech alive.
That's great.
We want to bring positive shows. I like to bring positive shows, positive people like you. I would like for you to come back on as much as you want to about the different books. And maybe once, since I like to be behind the scene, then you would host and you would bring on, for instance, I'm interested in this lady who is the niece of Ida B. Wells.
Great-granddaughter.
Great-granddaughter. Wouldn't that be nice if you and her could come on and you could just ask her, you'd be the host, and you and her would come on, and I would just appreciate that.
I would love to do that.
Well, whenever you want to, just let me know, whenever you can get her on this show.
Okay.
And it's been so nice and nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you
I'm
too.
so glad that I did this because, when we did the Bud Billiken and Amos lost the tape, I just felt like it was... I had to get you on there.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And tell your organization, the place where you work, that I'm so sorry about how he lost the tape of the Bud Billiken. But this has been an enjoyable evening. And I've learned a lot about Chicago, just the little information here. And just the fact that what you said, I believe that definitely was true now.
Oh, yeah.
Concentration.
I mean, it was the Union Army camp.
But it was still
But
something.
they were Confederate soldiers, yeah.
Yeah, right here.
Yep.
Now, where would I ever read that or know? From where?
Yeah.
From no book in school would tell you.
Yeah.
This is why it's always good to have writers and people to bring out issues that we don't get in our textbooks.
Correct.
And this is so important to our children today, too. So it's just been an enjoyable evening. And I'm going to really, this is one of the books that's interesting me, and also there's People and Places.